Neighborhood Opportunity Index. And what she's done, she has ranked every county in the United States on 29 different indicators of access to opportunity for kids. Things like the quality of elementary schools and the high school graduation rate and the level of employment and unemployment and homeownership rates and median household income and access to clean air and water and exposure to air pollution and access to resources for health like green space, healthy food environments, walkability. And by the way, this is a 2020 paper, okay? So we're looking at current data. And what she did in this 2020 paper, she looked at the 100 largest metropolitan areas in the United States. And she said in those areas, who lives in the very low, which children, she's focused on children in this analysis, which children live in the very low and low opportunity neighborhoods. And she found that 67%, 2 out of every 3 Black children, 58% of all Latino kids, 53% of Native American kids, compared to about 1 in 5 white and Asian kids, live in very low or low opportunity neighborhoods. Who lives in high opportunity neighborhoods? Almost 2/3 of all white kids and Asian kids, compared to 1 in 5 Black and Latino kids. So place where you live is a powerful predictor of access to opportunity in the United States. In fact, research reveals, and I'm sharing with you 2 more studies, that place determines even your levels of education and income in America. Segregation is the central driver of racial ethnic differences in income, education, and wealth. So this is David Cutler, an economist at Harvard University, using national data for the United States, rigorous statistical procedures, econometric models I cannot even fully explain. But he's able to show statistically, if you could eliminate residential segregation in the United States, you would completely erase Black-white differences in income, in education, and in unemployment, and reduce Black-white differences in single motherhood by 2/3. All of these differences are linked to opportunity at the neighborhood level. One more study, another Harvard economist, Raj Chetty. He's created the Opportunity Atlas. You can look at it, and you can look at some of the analyses by different cities in the United States. He has done an amazing intergenerational analysis. And this is the question he's asking. Using national census data over multiple years, he got special permission to get access to all of the census data. And over multiple years in the United States, he said, let's look at Black and white kids who start life with households, their parents have the same level of income. So he's controlling on parental income. How are the kids doing in the next generation? And he finds in 99% of census tracts in America, census tracts is a geographic area, 99%, Black boys have lower earnings than white boys. Why? They don't work hard enough? No. They live in neighborhoods that differ in access to opportunity. Black boys do as well as white boys if they live in a neighborhood and good resources, but that's not true for 99% of Black boys in America. So what do these data tell us? They tell us that the racial inequities in economic status that matter for life and health do not reflect a broken system. No. They reflect a carefully crafted system, functioning as planned, successfully implementing social policies, many of which are rooted in racism. They are not accidents, they're not random effects, they're not acts of God. They show the extent to which an upstream mechanism of racism has produced a truly rigged system in the United States. And this segregation that shapes access to opportunity includes access to health. We did this review paper some time ago in 2012, looking at the relationship between segregation, where you live, and the access to quality care. Segregation leads to the concentration of Black and brown low-income populations with high levels of pre-existing comorbidities, with an epidemic of poorly controlled chronic diseases because the lack of access to quality early intervention and preventive care. There's a shortage of primary care providers in these contexts, a severe shortage of specialists, And health providers in segregated communities report that they lack the privileges to refer their patients to the best specialists and the best places of care. So this lifelong access to suboptimal care has consequences. What research also indicates that if you are low in income and low in wealth and live in disadvantaged segregated neighborhoods, you have high levels of exposure to stressors. Not only high levels of exposure to individual stressors, but also the greater clustering of stressors. Let me give you an example from a study we did for Chicago. Compared to whites in the city of Chicago, blacks and US-born Latinos had higher levels of major life events, like experiencing the death of a loved one or unemployment, high levels of financial stressors, like reporting inability to make ends meet at the end of the month, high levels of relationship stressors, high levels of neighborhood stressors, like having your home broken into. So across the board, they had higher levels of these individual stressors, but also the greater clustering. If they had one, they were more likely to have multiple. So I'm talking about how racism operates. We've talked about the structural mechanism, one mechanism, segregation, place. I also want to talk about individual discrimination at the interpersonal level. That is also an added source of stress, in addition to the stresses I mentioned before. Martin Luther King, back in 1967, said that discrimination is a hellhound that gnaws at Negroes in every waking moment of their lives, declaring that the lie of their inferiority is accepted as the truth in the society dominating them. Now, he was not a researcher, but this is a hypothesis. We could test it. Is this really true? So I decided to test it some years ago and developed multiple measures to capture the experiences of discrimination. And Kurt mentioned this one, the Everyday Discrimination Scale that I developed, that is now the most widely used scale. There are over 450 published peer-reviewed scientific papers from around the world documenting this everyday discrimination has negative effects on health. Just finished a paper looking at the largest study of the Aboriginal population in Australia. I'm working with colleagues there using the Everyday Discrimination Scale. And we document that it accounts for 40% of the levels of ill health among the Aboriginal, mental health, psychological distress among the Aboriginal population in Australia. So what is striking about this is not a comprehensive scale that captures all aspects of discrimination. It just captures the little day-to-day indignities, being treated with less courtesy and respect, receiving poorer service than others at restaurants or stores, people acting as if they think you are not smart or they're afraid of you. Little indignities. And just to illustrate, I told you the example of Australia, but Dr. Tanya Lewis at Emory University, she was at Yale, now at Emory. Each line on this study reflects a different study she's done, a different paper published. Each paper looking at everyday discrimination, predicting a health outcome, adjusting for a broad range of confounders, many of them from longitudinal analyses. High levels of everyday discrimination, just those little indignities, linked to more rapid development of heart diseases measured by coronary artery calcification, leads to high levels of inflammation, which puts you at risk for a broad range of conditions, leads to higher blood pressure. Pregnant women who report everyday discrimination give birth to lower birth weight infants. A study of the elderly followed time, everyday discrimination is an independent predictor of more rapid declines in cognitive function over time. A community sample, high levels of everyday discrimination links to poorer sleep, both sleep quantity and quality. A study of adults followed over time. If you score high on everyday discrimination, you are at higher risk of premature death. Those little indignities are literally killing people prematurely. This linked to shorter telomere length, dose-response relationship with visceral fat. That's a bad type of abdominal fat that puts you at risk for a broad range of chronic conditions. Just to illustrate just the power of this stressor having negative effects on health. And I want to pause. There's a take-home message for us here. Christ Subject Lessons, page 339. We are told every soul is surrounded by an atmosphere of its own. An atmosphere, it may be charged with the life-giving power of faith and courage and hope, and sweet with the fragrance of love, or it may be heavy and chill with the gloom of discontent and selfishness, or poisonous with the deadly taint of cherished sin. And these are the words. By the atmosphere surrounding us, every person with whom we come in contact is consciously or unconsciously affected.
Amen.
It means in our day-to-day life, everyone who enters our space is either being pushed a little closer towards heaven or a little closer towards hell as a result of being in our presence. This is a sobering thought that each of us have an influence, and we have asked God to give us the power to have an influence for good. Then there are hidden ways in which stressors linked to race and racism also adversely affect health. Here is a study that found 70% of Black mothers in the United States said they were very concerned that their children might be harmed by the police. What is the impact of this anxiety and stress on these women? A paper published in 2021 looked at 3,000 mothers in 20 cities, and almost a quarter of their children had been stopped by the police by the age of 15. And mothers of youth who were stopped by the police are more than twice as likely to report depression and anxiety-related sleep difficulties. Former postdoctoral fellow with me, Professor Brandisha Tynes, now at USC in California, has been doing work. We published the first study looking at experiences of discrimination in online contexts and how that affected middle and high school students in the state of Illinois was our first study. This has been her career. This is one of her more recent papers, 2019, a study of Black and Latinx adolescents, 11 to 19 years old. Those who report they have watched more videos online of someone of their racial ethnic group beaten, arrested, or being shot by the police in the next year have higher levels of PTSD and depressive symptoms. So what's happening and what they spend time watching adversely impacts them. Here is another study that has gotten a lot of press. I did this study with one of my former students, Jacob Bohr, and other colleagues. What we did, we accessed a database that contained every police shooting in the United States, and we collapsed the data over a 3-year window of time. And then we linked it to another database of the mental health of the population in every state. And we were able to document that every police shooting of an unarmed Black person led to worse mental health, not for the family and friends, but for the entire Black population of the state in which it occurred, and that worse mental health persisted for 3 months. And it was a specific effect because in the database, we could identify police shootings of an armed person or an unarmed person. And police shootings of an armed Black person had no effect on the mental health of the Black population. It was only police shootings of an unarmed Black person that did that. And we can't tell what it was, but this is how we make sense of it. The fact that the person was unarmed, that has the perception it was unjust, unfair, unnecessary. But also the fact that the person was unarmed. You don't have to be doing anything wrong. And it could be you. It could be any family member of yours. And what's the impact of all of this stress from your neighborhood and where you live? And the stress of discrimination on individuals. Researchers today in the United States are using words like accelerated aging and premature aging and biological weathering. What they are finding is that by middle age, the average Black person compared to a white person of the same age is actually physiologically older. Think of it this way. Your age captures not only how long you live. If you live in a bad environment, your age is also capturing how long you've been exposed to bad environmental conditions and how physiologically compromised you've become by such exposures. And so research is documenting the earlier onset of disease among Black people for a broad range of conditions. I'm showing you only the data on hypertension in the interest of time. But you could see at age 50 to 64, 61% of Black people have high blood pressure compared to 41% of whites, but that pattern exists for a broad range of outcomes. So let me move along here quickly. Basically, what we are showing you is that there are mechanisms of racism, structural, that determines where you live, individual discrimination that has negative effects. It's a major source of stress. There's also racism in the culture that leads to negative stereotypes that also leads to discrimination. Unequal Treatment Report is a major report published by the National Academy of Medicine in the United States in 2003. We are just about 20 years away from this, 20 years since the report was first published. I served on this committee that produced the Unequal Treatment Report. What was the context? A researcher went to a medical conference and had actors, some black, some white, some male, some female, described symptoms with identical words and had 800 internal medicine physicians in the United States look at these videos. All the actors said they had the same job, lived in the same neighborhood, used the same language to describe their symptoms, even were trained to have the same facial expression as they described it. The only thing that differed was some were black and some were white, some were male and some were female. And the study found that faced with the identical symptoms, physicians prescribe differently the appropriate treatment for you based on your race and gender. And so the United States Congress asked the National Academy of Medicine, could you identify, did what happened at a medical conference with fake patients actually happen when people go into healthcare contexts in the United States? And this was the report on equal treatment. You can Google it, you can find it online at the National Academy of Sciences website. And what we found, I served in the committee, was one of 15 persons on that committee, across virtually every therapeutic intervention, from the most simple to the most complicated, blacks and other minorities receive poorer quality care. So it wasn't access to care, it was given care. What's the quality? Poorer quality care than whites. I don't have time to review the evidence, but there are lots of studies. They're stunning. I will show you one study, and I just happened to be in the state of Florida. This was a study published in 2020. A study of 1.8 million hospital births in Florida from 1992 to 2015. When cared for by white doctors, black babies are 3 times more likely than white newborns to die in the hospital. The disparity is cut in half when black babies are cared for by a black doctor. Doesn't tell us what are the drivers, but it shows us a striking pattern. Okay, I've talked about the problem, but let me tell you why I think we need to act now. As a society, as a world, as a global community, as a Christian community, we cannot afford to pay for the multiple costs caused by this societal racism that has these negative consequences on health. So what are the costs? One is lives lost. Scholars have calculated what they call excess deaths. That is, how many black people die every year who wouldn't die if they had the same health experience as whites? The answer to that, I've broken it down on a daily basis. About 220 black people die prematurely every single day who wouldn't die if there were no racial differences in health. Imagine a fully loaded jumbo jet with 220 passengers and crew crashing from the Orlando airport today, and the same thing happened tomorrow and every day next week and every day next month. That's what we're talking about when we say there are racial disparities in health. So this is a loss of life on a massive scale. But there are enormous costs to mental health as well. This is a study I'm going to share with you. I am stressed out about the study, I confess, because I struggle to make sense of it and I have a hard time. This stress is taking a toll on mental health, especially the mental health of young children. So here is the study, national data between 1993 and 2012 of elementary school children, remember age 5 to 11, national data for the United States. The rates of suicide in elementary school stable overall, stable for Hispanic and Asian children, marked decline for white children, they have doubled for black children. See, why I struggle with this, when I was in elementary school, I knew what suicide was. So to hear about suicide rates doubling among black elementary school children, there's an update. The CERM researchers looked, well, let's see what's happening through 2015. Yes, black boys and girls 5 to 13, it's not just to 11, they've showed it's up to 13, have a suicide rate twice as high as their white counterparts. And it leaves us with the question, what does it feel like to a black child to be growing up in America today? And what are we going to do about it? Then there are the economic costs of these racial inequities. Two researchers, Tom Leviste and colleagues, have showed that racial inequities in health are costing the U.S. economy $309 billion annual loss to the economy. Most of it lost productivity in the most productive years of life. When people are dying prematurely, they're not making the productive contributions they could to the economy. And for the Christian, what are the costs that we should be thinking about? And I would argue that they are costs for us being disobedient. Why? Because Isaiah 58, which Eric Hahn from Australia studied and identified that this is the most quoted passage by the Spirit of prophecy. So we talk about it as the lesser light. It shines with unique brightness on Isaiah 58. And it says it is the work called, the term used, medical missionary work. Today we call it comprehensive health ministry. And she said, this is the work of every church. And what is the work? To loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke. Is it not to deal your bread to the hungry, and that you bring the poor to the cast out to your house, and when you see the naked, that you cover him, and that you hide not yourself from your own flesh? And then if you missed it in Isaiah, Jesus said, and Dwayne just reminded us earlier this morning, we need to have seminars on Matthew 25, for Jesus will separate the sheep from the goats, because he will say, I was hungry. Did you feed me? I was thirsty. Did you give me something to drink? I was a stranger. That's an old English word. I was an immigrant. And did you invite me in? Naked, did you clothe me? Sick, did you visit me? I was in prison, and did you come to me? And in case you missed it in Matthew, Desire of Ages says, Jesus pictured to his disciples a scene of the great judgment day, and he represented its decision on turning on one point. True or false? Is the seventh day the Sabbath or not? No. There will be but two classes. Their eternal destiny will be determined by what they have done or neglected to do for Jesus in the person of the poor and suffering. What can we do? Well, number of things. We need to build more health into the delivery of medical care. What do I mean by that? One of the things we can do is ensure access to care for all. I'm going to show you an example of a dramatic study from the state of Delaware. They decided to address the problem of colorectal cancer screening. And for those of you from outside of the US, the United States is the only major industrialized country in the world that does not provide access to medical care to all of its residents. Okay? So the state of Delaware said, we are going to make colorectal cancer screening available to everybody. And then 2 years later, they said, we're going to make colorectal cancer treatment available to everybody, whether you have insurance or not, whether you have money or not. And this is what they found. The program was implemented in 2002. So the year before the program compared to 6 or 8 years, depending on whether screening or treatment you look at. Look at what happened over time from 2001 to 2003. They eliminated the racial disparities in screening for colorectal cancer. Both groups, blacks and whites, increased. They virtually eliminated the incidence, the new cases of colorectal cancer, with marked declines for blacks and for whites. And they virtually 90% of the gap in colorectal mortality was eliminated as a result of this program. And do you know what? They have calculated if the United States did this globally, there would be 42,000 fewer blacks who would get colorectal cancer each year and 2,700 fewer who would die. And most stunning of all, they showed that the program literally saved the state of Delaware money. As a result of the reduced incidence of an early diagnosis, there was a net savings to the state of 1.5. Sorry, got to go back here. This is running on its own. Okay, I need technical assistance here. Big button goes forward, little button goes. Yes, no, my screen has gone blank. So no one is sharing their video. That's what the screen says there, and there's nothing here. All of a sudden, it just went blank. I haven't done anything. It just went blank. Ah. Oh. All right. I can do that. It's behind me, so we can. Okay. It's okay. I just need to stand so I can see the screen, and it's fine. As long as Dwayne can still see me. Okay. This is the point. The point was the program not only worked, literally eliminated disparities, but it saved the state money. Now, not every problem will be solved in that way. Not every problem will be solved in that way, but at least we need to identify what are the health conditions that additional screening would solve. What else do we need to do? Relatedly, from some data I presented, we need to work on diversifying the workforce to meet the needs of all patients. Here is a randomized controlled trial, highest quality of scientific evidence. It was done in Northern California. They took Black men recruited from the local community, sent them to a Saturday morning clinic at a nearby health center. And when they got to the clinic, they were randomized to see a Black provider or a provider of a different race. And this is what they found. Men who saw a Black doctor were more likely to talk about other health problems, more likely to do the screening for diabetes, to get a flu vaccine, to do the screening for cholesterol. Much greater engagement with the healthcare system when there was racial concordance with the providers. We face a huge challenge. In 2014, in the United States, there were fewer Black males in the first year of medical school than in 1978. In the mid-1960s, 2.9% of all practicing physicians in the US were Black. In 2019, 5% of physicians are Black, 6% are Latino, 0.3% are Indigenous. Wow. We have a long way to go to increasing the diversity of our healthcare workforce, even as the diversity of our population increases. I have good news. While we wait to increase the diversity of the workforce, there's a lot we can do with our current workforce. This was a study done also in Northern California of patients with HIV, and they found racial disparities in the receipt of the appropriate treatment, in self-efficacy, that the patient's following through and doing what the provider requested, and in the medication working, producing the viral suppression it was supposed to do. But what this study found is while there was racial disparities in the patient population overall, they administered to the providers a cultural competence scale. And they found that for providers high on cultural competence, regardless of their race, if the provider was high in cultural competence, there were no racial disparities in the patient population. Wow. What are the characteristics? It doesn't tell us how to get there. That's what we need to figure out. But it tells us what are the characteristics of those providers high in cultural competence. Here are some questions on the scale. Providers who agree that family and friends are important to health as doctors. Providers who agree that social history contributes to how they care for their patients. Providers who agree they were familiar with the lay beliefs their patients have. Providers who said they asked their patients about alternative therapies they may use. Providers who said they find out what their patients think is the cause of their illness. Providers who said they involve their patients in decisions about their health care. So what emerges from this is providers who are engaged, who are respectful, who listen, who ask questions of their patients. When those conditions existed, regardless of the race, there were no racial disparities in care. What else do we need to do? We need to provide care that addresses the social context. The World Health Organization asks, what do we accomplish if all we do is treat illness and send people back to live in the same conditions that made them sick in the first place? I want to share with you a study. This is a 1978 study by Len Syme. So this is not new information, okay? Len Syme is now retired from UC Berkeley, where he was a public health professor. But this is a study, randomized trial he did. Took 244 patients, all with hypertension, randomized them to 3 conditions. 1, routine care, go to your doctor, get your medication, go on your merry way home. 2nd, in addition to the visit to your physician, you went to a class where someone like me, a MPH-trained health educator, taught you about hypertension. And the 3rd group got their medication from their doctor, and they took people from the local community, could be church members, right, lay people, and trained them with basic information about blood pressure and why it was important and what you could do to take care of yourself, but also trained them in identifying all of the resources that existed in the community to help people with problems they face. And those lay people made home visits and talked to the patients about their blood pressure, but referred to them as necessary, as indicated, to resources that they didn't create new resources, just linked them to resources that existed. And what did they find? 7 months later, those who got the lay intervention were more likely to have their blood pressure controlled than the other two groups. They knew twice as much about blood pressure than any of the other two groups. They were more compliant with taking their blood pressure medication, and their blood pressure medication was more effective in controlling their blood pressure. Everything you want. And what was different? Their blood pressure was understood and addressed within the context of their lives. There's a report from the National Academy of Medicine integrating social care into the delivery of medical care. And it outlines many opportunities for healthcare systems and professionals to address the social needs of patients. Here, Kirsten Bibbins-Domingo wrote a commentary. She was the chair of that committee. Of the key messages from it, they call it the 5 A's. The healthcare systems and healthcare providers need to raise awareness levels as individuals, screen them for the challenges they face, and at the individual levels, adjust activities to alter clinical care. So if the person has trouble getting to care, maybe you will do a telehealth visit, for example. Assist individuals. Maybe they have trouble getting to care, a voucher that enables them to get to care. At the community level, health systems can align, engage in activities that's worked with other players within the community to solve problems, like develop ride-sharing programs, for example, or engage in advocacy with political leadership to do things to change some of the challenges their patient populations face. What else can we do? Well, we need to build on the individual and community resources and resilience factors. People are struggling right now, and we need to help them and facilitate, encourage those resources that make a difference. Here is a study that illustrates the power of social ties. This was done by Gene Brody and colleagues. They studied Black teenagers in the state of Georgia. They found that those teenagers who were high on discrimination at age 16, 17, and 18, by age 20, I didn't say age 40, I didn't say age 30, I said by age 20, they found those teenagers high on discrimination, higher levels of stress hormones as measured by cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, high levels of blood pressure, high levels of CRP, that's a mark of inflammation, high level of BMI at age 20. However, what they found is the association between exposure to discrimination and biological dysregulation at age 20 is completely broken among those teens who were embedded in good social relationships with their teachers, their parents, their peers. So the quality of social ties literally broke the link between exposure to stress and discrimination. This is the first study I published in the area of religion and health. It's a 1991 study. We looked at residents of New Haven, Connecticut. There was a faculty at Yale at the time. Residents of New Haven, Connecticut, followed them over 2 years, looked at their mental health at baseline, look at their mental health 2 years later, look at the stressful experiences they experienced over time, but also asked about the frequency of church attendance. And what we found, that people who had high levels of stress had worse mental health 2 years later. But if you had high levels of stress and you attended religious services regularly, religious services buffered the negative effects of stress exposure on your mental health. And this is a more recent study looking at a national sample of Blacks. Exposure to discrimination leads to worse mental health. But 3 aspects of religious engagement: frequency of religious attendance, receiving support from the members of your congregation, and seeking religious guidance in your life. Each of these reduce the negative effects of the stress of discrimination on mental health. Strategy number 3, the last one. We need, if I've talked about segregation and how it impacts on communities and impacts on access to resources, we need to create what I call communities of opportunity to minimize, neutralize, and dismantle the systems of racism that create inequities in health. We need to think of ways in which we can enrich the quality of neighborhood environments, increase economic development in poor areas, improve housing quality, and the safety of neighborhood environments. I have written a paper, I'll show it under my last screen, that lays out the scientific evidence for all of these strategies. In the interest of time, I'm just going to comment on two of them: invest in early childhood and improve neighborhood and housing conditions. This is a study done in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. What did it show? It showed that taking poor kids, 80% of them Black, at birth, put them into an early childhood program where they got intellectual stimulation, good medical care, good nutrition, by age 21, better health, better success in school, better employment success. By the mid-30s, lower rates of risk factors for cardiovascular disease. This is the differences in blood pressure levels by the mid-30s linked to what was done birth through 5. The foundations of health in adulthood are laid in childhood. We need to improve neighborhood and housing conditions. We have good quality scientific evidence. If you just take poor people, this was public housing residents, change their neighborhood, improves their health. No health intervention. 10 to 15 years later, lower levels of obesity, severe obesity, diabetes risk. Do you think it's impossible to do? That's what a lot of policymakers tell me. Oh, that's so hard to do. I want to give you an example. Purpose-built communities. Here is the transformation it did in East Lake, Atlanta. This was East Lake Meadows, an African-American public housing project, very high crime rate, dilapidated housing, 13% of adults employed, the local elementary school, one of the worst performing in the state of Georgia. Look at the villages of East Lake today, 90% reduction in violent crime, mixed income, high quality housing, all able-bodied persons employed. The school, even though 60% of the students qualify for reduced price lunch, coming from a poor background, it's one of the best performing elementary schools in the state of Georgia. It can be done. This is their model. Address all the challenges faced by poor communities simultaneously, comprehensive integrated place-based solutions, high quality education, and wraparound services to the community. And you know what? Purpose-built communities will provide free technical assistance to any community in America who wants to replicate their model. I've worked with them. They're doing it. There are 22 purpose-built sites in the country now that are replicating this model. And I want to close by showing you innovative solutions from healthcare institutions. Healthcare institutions can make a huge difference. This is from Boston. Boston Medical Center, the safety net health facility in Boston, has taken its roof of the hospital and turned it into a farm to address food insecurity in the community. Okay, I'm just showing you the innovation. Another example I love, Loma Linda University Health has a great federally qualified health center, built a new building, and what did they do with the top floor? Created what they called a gateway college to address unemployment. San Bernardino, California is one of the most disadvantaged cities in the United States, where less than 20% of all high school graduates go on to any higher education. And this is providing certified nurse assistants, pharmacy tech, surgical tech, community health worker. I've met there, talked to some of these students, and they talked about they now want to go to nursing school. They now want to go to medical school. Their horizons have been expanded as a result of their exposure. Dignity Health, a large healthcare system, has invested $90 million in low-interest loans to address housing access in the communities in which they work. Healthcare systems are doing things. And finally, one of the most comprehensive models out there, Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, Illinois. They have decided that they want to eliminate the gap in life expectancy between poor areas of their service area and wealthy areas by 50% in the next 10 years. And what are they going to do? They're going to hire locally and develop talent. And so they've given an emphasis on providing jobs to people in their local service area. What else are they doing? Utilizing local labor, prioritizing them in the work that they provide. This is a healthcare system. This is what they're thinking of doing to improve health of the community. They will buy and source locally. What else will they do? They will invest locally in retirement readiness. That includes they are offering Fifth Third e-bus. This is a financial literacy class to the community as part of their efforts to improve health. And finally, they are incentivizing their employees to engage in volunteering in the community and making a difference in the community. I leave you with two quotations. Martin Luther King said, "True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar, but it understands that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring." I've been talking about edifices that produces beggars. We as Seventh-day Adventists know there is no utopia here on earth, but Jesus wants us to make a difference while we are here. He wants us to live out his life in the way we make a difference for the lives of others. And finally, the words of Robert Kennedy. Each time a man or woman stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he or she sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And those ripples can build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. It is my hope that, inspired by God's call to us, each one of us will commit to being a tiny ripple of hope, and together we can make a difference to improve life and health for all God's children in our communities. Thank you.
What I didn't tell you is that Dr. Williams also has an MDiv, and that was on high display at the end, which is the way he ends most of his presentations, with a call to action and a spiritual connection. And that's one of the reasons why he is so treasured as a speaker, and probably so threatening to those in power because of the calls that he makes to dismantle, in some ways, some of the social structures and to create new social structures and safety nets. I'm seeing on our schedule that we have about a half an hour for Q&A, and Renee Drum is our facilitator. So Renee, if you would like to be our moderator.
And I'll need some help because I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions or comments. So who would like to start? Go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you. So I really appreciated the talk, Dr. Williams, on so many levels, but I resonated with the question of can we afford this as a community, as a society, the costs of this as well as all of these losses. And what it made me think of in this context is, can we afford these costs as a church? Because I would propose, don't have the data, but it looks like it, that these inequities that exist in our society are also modeled in our churches, that are oftentimes within certain neighborhoods and things like this. And so just thinking of that and thinking of ideas, the call to action of what can we do as a church community to recognize these inequities, educate our membership, but also position ourselves in a way to move those needles.
A really good question. You are absolutely on target. I have a Vesper talk this evening. I would argue that it's not just an optional thing for us. This is exactly what God has called us to do. So if we are going to fulfill our mission, we have to embrace it. Are these issues embraced by the church? Rhetorically, yes. But what are we doing about really making a difference, and about really making it a priority, and about really investing in training our membership broadly? Because one of the issues to keep in mind is that I have heavily focused on racial inequities, but they have to be understood in the broader context of socioeconomic inequities. So the challenges I'm talking about, while they do have a disproportionate negative impact on disadvantaged racial populations, they also have a disproportionate negative impact on low socioeconomic populations, regardless of race. So this is about a call that Jesus is calling us to minister to his children. And so I don't think we have an option if we're going to be faithful to his call. And that's why Seth talked about the cost of disobedience.
Okay, thank you. And Dwayne?
Thank you. One of my closest friends from grad school was the U.S. Census Director under younger Bush. And he was a very, very conservative Republican. But the kind of data you presented changed his mind. He argues in a public book he's published that if we don't address income disparity, the U.S. economy will collapse in about 25 to 30 years. As white people die, and that they'll take a lot of that wealth with them their last 6 months of life. But the economy collapses if we don't address income disparity. If we become increasingly diverse with increasing Hispanic, immigrant, and African-American populations, without income equality being approached, there's no one to buy the goods and services we produce. I don't know what your thoughts of that. Not just that it costs us, but we can't survive without addressing income inequality.
Yes, I'll just share with you another statistic. I agree with you, Dwayne, insightful as usual, but I'll give you another statistic. If you look at the Social Security system, I sometimes bring this up in my talks. If you look at the Social Security system, when it was initially established, there were something like 12 persons working for every person receiving benefits. Today, it's about 4 or 5 persons for every person receiving benefits. Come with me to 2060. For every person receiving Social Security benefits, which if the Lord tarries, some of us will be there, there will be only 2 persons working in the labor force. One of those 2 will be Black or Latino. They are in elementary school today. If we want Social Security as a society to be there for us, we need to ensure that those Black, Latino kids and Native American kids get every opportunity to be successful, productive in the labor force, else there will not be a Social Security system to provide for us. So I'm agreeing with you. Just another example.
Yeah, well said. Well said. But look, I mean, this is what we need to convince the conservative white population. It's in their interests for their own survival of themselves and their children to address income inequality. Their children won't survive if we don't address income inequality.
I agree, but that's not what they hear online. Dwayne, I should tell you this, just a brief conversation with Dwayne. I've stopped getting them, but for about an 8-month period, I would get about a 20-page email message from a white supremacist group. They were sending it to several members of the Department of African and African American Studies at Harvard, as well as a long list of other people. And I left the experience immensely troubled. I'll tell you why. The things they were saying were absurd and ridiculous on the one hand, but everything said was documented. They were citing sources, they were citing experts, they were citing magazine articles, they were citing scientific studies in support of everything that was said. For the average person reading this, it sounded like it was the gospel. And they were providing to you that which the media had hidden from you. And for that young man in Buffalo, New York, if he read it, I know enough to kind of identify what is true and what's wrong and where they are wrong and what's the evidence on the other side. But for the average person, and to think there is, we live in a society where this kind of information is being spewed out. And the thing that surprised me was how evidence-based it appeared. And it left me distressed because the average person doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the knowledge to sift through the falsehoods and the inaccuracies in this information, and it appears so credible. I was very disturbed.
Thank you. In one of the slides that you projected there, you state that those who engaged in religious activities showed reduced impact of discrimination.
Yes.
Now, my question comes, do you see engagement in religious activities as a sustainable solution or possibly a distraction from the duty to confront the social and political constructs that perpetuate discrimination in the first place? two points that strengthen that question I have. One actually comes from Karl Marx, obviously not a thought that comes from Karl Marx, not an Adventist, of course. And I managed to come across that quote quickly on Google. He says that religion is the opium of the people. It is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of a soulless condition. Point number two is in relation to the colonization in Africa. Discussing the story of colonization, authors have said in the past that the white man came first with the Bible and then followed with a gun. The two had different purposes. The Bible
I heard another version of that one, but go ahead.
So let's go. What's the answer, please? Is it a sustainable solution or a distraction from duty?
So it's a great question. I've heard the one that the white man came with the Bible and told people, let us pray. And when the natives opened their eyes, their land was gone. That's one I heard in Africa, but maybe that's the Southern Africa version of it. Anyway, so great question. Note that I offered 3 solutions. One was to address health, we need to improve the way we deliver medical care. 2, I said we need to support resilience resources that exist. And 3, we need to restructure things within society to create greater opportunity. There are people who are suffering right now, who are hurting right now. The interventions we will do that will change things down the road is not going to relieve their pain and suffering now. So it's like the choices. Do we build the fence at the top of the cliff to prevent people from falling over, or do we put an ambulance down at the bottom to rescue those? We need to do both. There are people drowning now. We need to rescue them. At the same time, we build the fences. So I would say it's not either or, it's both. And I think I try to emphasize the need to do both. The quote of Karl Marx you use, I use it all the time when I talk about religion and health. Because even Karl Marx, one of the harshest critics of religion, he said, it's the opiate of the people, but it's nonetheless, it depends on which version of Karl Marx you read, it's the heart of a heartless world or the spirit of spiritless situations. So he is saying, even though it's the opiate of the people, it is the heart of a heartless world, the spirit of spiritless situations. It's still the thing that's helping people to survive. And I think that's what the data is showing. I agree with you, if we were to take away from the studies of religion and health, that we do nothing about helping people in need, nothing about feeding the hungry. All we do is we encourage them to go to church, and going to church will be the panacea for them. I think that would be problematic. You see what I'm saying? But we can do both things, and that's my point.
Hey, Dr. Williams, thank you so very much. I need to make a confession. My heart seldom be inspired and excited when I'm presented with so many research outcomes. But my heart is inspired and delighted. And thank you for your clarity and engaging attitude as you teach us so much. So my name is Ngan Ling Long. I'm an immigrant from Hong Kong since 2006. My first stop was at Stanford Hospital, California, and then 12 years ago I moved here, and now I'm working as a CPE educator at Advent Health. That means that my main function is to educate, to train chaplain interns and chaplain residents. One of your research you mentioned about the training of the lay people in relation to improve the hypertension in the community. The research that you mentioned reminds me of a similar research actually did by Florida Hospital in mid-90s, done by Dick Tibbetts, now a retired leaders of our health system. And the theme is about the practice of forgiveness and hypertension. It's an intervention research, and actually Greg here, you know, our leaders in our healthcare system, he's one of the member in the research team, so you can speak much more. But because I did use this research paper for the education of my students, that's why I remember it. And so what I try to say is, this was a successful, although it's a small scale, but successful research that indicating a strong, not correlation, but causation relationship, because it's a before and after research, control group, powerful research, although the population is small. But the implication that is, it demonstrates the causal relationship between the practice of forgiveness, yes, and the reduction in hypertension of the patients. So that's what, back to that research you mentioned about the empowering training of the lay person or people and in relation to hypertension. I want to recognize that here we have congregational leaders. Here we have spiritual leaders from healthcare system. And here we have academic leaders. I'm just wondering, shall we like redo that training of lay people in our community to demonstrate, because we already have a very good example, then we can, use all this methodology or, literature review. And I think that will be also as an intervention, as a ministry, we offer to our community also an integrative effort, like a integrated witness to the community. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your kind words. But your point is well taken. There is a large literature. I just focused on Lensheim's study to show how long we've had this kind of evidence from a randomized controlled trial. 1978 was that paper. But there's a huge literature on what's called community health workers. And in the Loma Linda Gateway College, community health workers is one of the trainings they provide. So the evidence domestically and globally, lots of studies from Latin America and other parts of the world, that training lay people, sending them into the community, they can identify with the average residents, and they can make a big difference in improving health. So there's no question. And Ministry of Healing talks about every church being a training center, getting our members involved with basic knowledge and skills to make a difference in the community. So we've known this for 100 years. That's one of the things we call to do. Every church needs to do this. So yes, every health system, but every church. And I would say there's a lot more evidence than just that one study I cited. Yes, absolutely.
Well, Dr. Williams, thank you. There are few people in the world that are able to articulate, synthesize, and advocate quite like you.
Thank you.
So you're the gift to the world, and thank you for your rigorous attempts to advance and unearth the skeleton in the homes or the structures. So a comment and then a question. Reading through this week a article in the Washington Post by a journalist who, describing the Buffalo massacre, mentioned that Tops was more than just a grocery store. It was a community center, a place of gathering. And speaking to your point about places and context, and that it was the bull's eye to the heart of our community. One of my concerns in America today and the world is this incisive individualism ideology that prevents us from viewing the structural pieces that you spoke about. And the whole controversy around critical race theory is precisely an attack at eliminating or recognizing that it exists. And so the question is, boy, that's increasingly becoming a huge barrier that dismisses questions outright, right? One, and then two, David, I'm wondering about the role of religious institutions by way of countering the excessive individualism by bringing forth a communal ethic that helps to reinforce really basic tenets that we owe ourselves to each other. In other words, the common good, the ethic of the common good has been lost increasingly. No doubt why we are leading in deaths in the Western world with respect to vaccination and all that. So will we be able to address the individualism that is so prevalent, to be able to look at the structures? Because that's, in my mind, one of the most difficult things to address, empirically as well as by way of implications.
You asked the hard questions, my dear friend Edwin. But you're right. You are absolutely correct. I worry about my church. I am a Seventh-day Adventist by God's grace. I will always be a Seventh-day Adventist by God's grace. But I worry about my church. Sociologists who study religion talk about the Christian church in the United States as culturally captive. And what they mean by that, we claim to follow Jesus. We claim to follow the Bible. But if you look at our belief systems that guide the priorities of everyday life, if you look at how we live and how we make decisions, they are driven more by the dictates of our culture than about anything the Bible says. And I think we are obviously products of our society. We are influenced by the larger culture. That's normal. The question is, how do we bring to bear what God is calling us to do as opposed to what our culture is dictating to us? And we need spiritual leadership. Spiritual leadership that is calling us to God throughout time, has had his leaders, has had the prophets, to call his people back. I don't have time. I preached a sermon on Isaiah 58. And if you read Isaiah 58, it's striking. Cry aloud, spare not, tell my people their transgression, in the house of Israel their sins. And you think God is going to talk about some really bad things that people are doing? And what are the next words? Yet they seek me daily and they delight to do my will. I think people who seek in God daily and delighting to do his will, that's exactly what we would look at. And God is saying they have a problem. And I really think one of the things we need within Adventism is the prophetic voice that is calling us to a higher standard of righteousness, calling us out of our lukewarm condition to really grasp the challenge that God is calling us to do. I think even when we talk about evangelism, we think of evangelism primarily as getting the facts right about the 29 doctrines. And don't misunderstand me. I believe in the 29 doctrines and fundamental beliefs, and that's fine. But what the world, listen, if it was just about getting the facts, God could design a text message that could reach everybody on the planet in their own language, culturally appropriate. It would take a matter of seconds to get the gospel clearly to the entire world. A matter of seconds. But that's not what the world is looking for. They want to see people whose lives have been transformed by the gospel, who are living the life of Jesus in their everyday life, who reflect, as Pastor Wintley Phipps says, who reflect, resemble, and reveal the character of God. That's what the world is waiting for. And we are not in our conversations about what our mission and purpose is, that is not the emphasis. And that's what the world is waiting for. And so I wish I could tell you I had the magic bullet, but you're absolutely right. Frameworks Institute is a organization that specializes in studies of communication and how to talk about these topics. And they show exactly as you described where most American public is all of these problems of inequities were solved back in the 60s. And if you have a problem, it's your fault. You have refused to buy into the core American values that determine success in society. So we do have a task to do, and all I can do is use my voice when I have a chance to call our people to what God is calling us to do. But it is a troubling thing what you've raised, and I do think there is a failure of spiritual leadership. There is spiritual leadership. Don't misunderstand me. But its emphasis is not on the transformation of our lives to live the life of Jesus, to make a difference. What did Jesus say? Like, this shall all men know you're my disciples because you go to church on the Sabbath, because you understand the 2300 days, because you have the right teaching on the state of the dead. No, it's when you love one another, which would be a big enough chance that if he stop there, but he says, love one another as I have loved you. How much has Jesus loved us? And how do we live that out in our lives? That's our challenge. Amen. Other than saying it's a challenge, I wish, but let me just say this. Because there was a time in my life when I was very discouraged in the church. There are days I have been ashamed to be an Adventist because I've been on Adventist boards and I've seen things happen that are unconscionable. And I tell you what has helped me. What has helped me is to realize Jesus knows more about the problems than I do. I'm seeing the tip of the iceberg. Jesus sees the whole thing. Jesus is more concerned about it than I am. And Jesus is more able to address it than I am. So I say, Lord, help me do my part. Help me to be right with you. And I'm trusting you to do the rest. And I put it in Jesus' lap and I don't stress out about it anymore. But that's just for anybody who's struggling. That's what has helped me. You've been waiting patiently.
Yeah. My name is Manuela Karpik, and I live in Prince George County in the Baltimore, South Maryland. And I work in Montgomery County in internal medicine. So what you are saying is exactly what we are seeing, and it's really heartbreaking because most of our patients are Medicaid and community plan people. And there are no specialists in the area we can refer them to because from months to months, there are less and less providers who are accepting that insurance. And HIPAA is one thing. But I'm really passionate about it because really there's so many Adventist doctors in this area, and free clinics are really needed over there in this county, in this area, and they're not happening. And that's one thing about my passion wanting to be a medical provider eventually myself is because it's so hard to see your patients. They don't get the care they need. It's not that the doctors don't want to do it in primary care. We don't have the resources. No one accepts this insurance. Every month we have less and less specialists. And I don't understand it. Why we, are Adventists, we're going to church. There are specialists in our churches, and they are not volunteering. It's not something you have to do all the time, but do it once a month or once a quarter, have a free clinic. It would help so much in the community, and we can motivate them. And so I'm just wanted to confirm the struggle you have been showing. I see in my work all the time, and it's heartbreaking. And it's just, I wish there would be something we could do to make people really aware of it. It's true. The Prince George County is majority Black. The system is broken, but there are only a few people. If we would really get together as a community, we could really make a difference, but it's not happening in this area.
Thank you for your example. I have a slide. I didn't show it because I already had too many slides to show. But it shows for Los Angeles, Medi-Cal in California. For the average emergency room visit in Los Angeles, providing system would get about $4,500 for the average emergency room visit from a commercial insurer. $650 from Medicare, the program that helps the elderly, $150 from Medicaid. And that's why, and many of my students think that, oh, every provider has to accept any insurance. Oh, no, they don't. They are free to determine which insurance they accept. And that's why, and so we have a system of underfunding, and that was done when Medicaid was developed. There were proposals to have Medicaid and Medicare combined in the same program, so then there would be enough political will to insure it. But who cares about the poor in America, really? And so that's a system we have. I do want to let you know there are examples. I have seen, I mentioned two of them quickly. One in Columbus, Ohio, where the Department of Community Health, held by a wonderful African-American woman who has since passed away, her name was Cheryl Boyce, they developed a program where they had 20 units at the lower level, 20 doctors, areas where doctors could work. And I think it was Tuesday and Thursday night a month. But basically what they worked on a model where they tried to get every physician in the county medical society to donate, I think 2 hours a month, or it was either 2 hours a month or 4 hours a month, and come. And they could come in, the place is all ready, they had insurance covered for them, and they just had to come in and deliver care. And they did that, and 2 nights a week from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., and they treated hundreds of patients a week. I also met someone in San Francisco, and I think the program was in Oakland, where she had a program that provided free care primarily to immigrants who didn't have any insurance. They raised the money they did a 1 annual fundraising banquet a year, raised $300,000 on average. They had 1 paid staff, which was a nurse practitioner, but they provided free care to hundreds of people a week because they got, and San Francisco area has a lot of medical residents and physicians. They got many physicians to donate 2 hours a month. And getting them to volunteer for 2 hours a month, everything is set up for them. They just have to show up for those 2 hours. They were able to develop care. I think these are stopgap Band-Aids on the problem, but those are some innovations I've seen in some parts of the country where people are trying to make a difference and reaching and touching the lives of many, even within the problems of the system. We need political change, really, and a will to do better, because it's not about the money. Let me give you a statistic. The United States is less than 5% of the world's population. According to the World Bank, we consume half of the money spent on medical care in the world annually is spent in the US. Less than 5% of the world's population. And we have these gaps you talk about. The problem is not about the money. There's enough money to do it. How are we using the money, and what are we committed to do? Who's next? Yes.
So I'm Carl Bailey from Andrews, but I'm actually speaking on behalf of other people. So let me read the question to you. I am Padma Tadiopala, a breast cancer researcher. Please help me understand this. Here's the example. The odds of having a triple negative breast cancer are 3-fold higher, with confidence intervals between 1.6 times and 5.5 times in Black compared with white women. Triple negative breast cancers are increased in Black women regardless of age or body mass index, and they have obviously a higher risk for mortality. Scientists have identified a new set of triple negative genes. Do you think it could be possible that encountering stress at an early age could turn on these genes?
The short answer to the question is yes. I mean, we have evidence from other areas of work that exposure to stress not only can, so for example, there's studies, Yehuda's work with the Holocaust survivors has shown epigenetic changes that lead them more vulnerable to PTSD. they pass on those epigenetic changes to their children. So we're documenting the intergenerational transfers of epigenetic effects that leaves populations more vulnerable. So absolutely, I have written a paper about breast cancer in African American women. I don't think it's only genes. I think it's the social context and what else they deal with in that matters as well. But certainly, again, I think there used to be a debate about the gene versus environment. Now we understand that debate is useless. It's the interaction of the two. So we get epigenetic changes in response to environmental conditions. I think we're almost out of time.
Yes, we are almost out of time, but
I don't take any questions from my friends. Dr. Glenn Archer. I did take one from Edwin. Edwin is gone.
So,
Okay.
so you know it's not going to be a difficult question.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just reading an article this morning about Wells Fargo, and I want to be sure. It was an article actually published in the New York Times. At Wells Fargo, a quest to increase diversity leads to fake job interviews. And 5 executives or workers at Wells Fargo have come forward stating that this has been a practice. And we know Wells Fargo did have a problem a few years ago, you know, in terms of giving home loans to blacks and so on. We recently heard a similar story from the NFL, where a coach, Miami coach, sued the NFL because they said despite the policy that blacks were supposed to be interviewed, someone is actually hired, and he was just brought in
the last minute, yeah.
At the last minute. So reading the story, it sometimes frustrates me, and you expressed a while ago your frustration sometimes with the system and how it works. And it seems to me that society is probably not going to change anything. I mean, who's listening to you and all this research you've done, you know? And here's where I believe the church comes in, because we should have a different approach to all of this. And I agree with you. We're not doing it right. We're still spending millions of dollars on the kind of evangelistic series that I attended when I was a child, when we were kids. And nobody's listening, nobody's going, but we still think that's the way to do things. And we have a society around us with people who are suffering, and we don't seem to be putting our emphasis there.
I don't think I even need to say anything other than agree with you. You're absolutely correct. There's an evangelistic series that my church and 8 other churches are doing in the Boston area right now. Have a union president from another union is conducting this evangelistic series in Boston right now. What was done in preparation for this meeting? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Other than, I mean, yes, they went to hand out handbills the Sabbath before. I mean, that's not only the methods of Jesus will give us true success in reaching the people. The Savior mingled with others as one who desired their goods, manifested an interest in their affairs, ministered to their needs. Then he bade them follow me.
And we have one more question,
Okay.
and that's from me because
Okay.
I get to do that. I listened to you very carefully. You started out by saying churches and institutions are positioned to do something. Several times throughout the talk, you said that what can we do? What will we do? Now I'm going to ask, what should we do and how should we start?
It's good, really good. What should we do? When I talk on health ministries, there are 2 assignments I give people to do. 1, read Isaiah 58, and 2, study the book Ministry of Healing. It lays out in detail what we need to do. In my talk later today, I will give an example from more than 100 years ago, what the church did when we took the Council of Ministry of Health seriously. So it's not that we don't know. I mean, people have, we don't know what to do. Read Ministry of Healing. It spells out how to help people with drug problems is there. How to help the poor is there. It tells us what to do. So it's really about us being informed, because I think my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge is true. So one of us is being informed. We need to be educated of what God has called us to do and has spelled out that we should do, and then make a commitment by his grace to do it, knowing that when we step out to do what he's asked us to do, he will enable us. Like what he said to Joshua, be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, for God will be with you wheresoever you go. That's our promise we can claim if we're doing what he's called us to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.